Hi, my name is Kalani, Tillema, and I'm going to be talking about a global workforce, offshoring. And this is in our book, A Gift of Fire, Social, Legal, and Ethical Issues for Computing Technology, written by Baase. We're going to be covering Chapter 6, Section 2.4, pages 287 to 293. And then to give a brief overview of this section, we're going to be covering a global workforce and the relation that it has with offshoring of jobs, as well as the several phenomena pertaining to offshoring, varying from business to business and country to country. We will also be going over the impact that offshoring has within the U.S. and other competing countries, as well as how offshoring of jobs can create problematic issues within the U.S. economy, and the side effects that arise from offshoring, as well as ethics that play a role in hiring foreign workers, and finally, how to avoid making unethical decisions when offshoring a global workforce. Offshoring can be referred to as the process of hiring companies and/or employees within other countries than one's own. And as the internet and web became more prevalent over past decades, the need for transportation costs had diminished almost entirely, which then ultimately fueled the drive for businesses to recruit offshore work. The first service jobs to go offshore were mainly data processing, computer programming professions, and the information technology jobs equate the largest makeup of offshore jobs. India and China are the targeted destinations of those. An example of offshoring most relatable to Americans is the transfer of customer service call centers and software help desks to India and other countries. There are many reasonings behind offshoring, and of those are businesses, companies, and corporations, organizations are delivered with the potential to save money manufacturing overseas through the reduction of costs of labor, depending on pay rates from country to country through offshoring of jobs. And there are just simply not enough skilled and trained professionals within the U.S. to fill these job positions. Therefore, businesses have to recruit elsewhere. And then offshoring has the power to create new jobs elsewhere, ultimately expanding the economy as well as threatening it. And then finally, just lower labor costs, which then equals lower prices for consumers and then translates to new products being made and services being feasible, demanding more labor workers and ultimately creating more job availability. There are many phenomena that pertain to offshoring. Of them are, one of them is just the increase of offshoring skilled workforce worry to arise due to the threat of job loss. This is mostly focused around high-paid jobs that are held by the middle class. And currently, 28 to 42 million people in the U.S. hold jobs that are destined to be offshored in the near future, forcing unemployment. Social scientists, politicians, and organizations view offshoring of jobs as an example of corporate greed utilized for increased profit. These individuals view offshoring as a means of fewer jobs in the U.S. occupied by lower-paid workers overseas that are accompanied with a decreased standard of living. Economist Alan Blinder sees offshoring as disruptive, for it has the power to mask job loss. However, he also argues that although offshoring may be seen as disruptive, it can also be seen as a massive transition versus massive unemployment. And Blinder states that with flexibility, planning, and changes in education, that is the only way that offshoring can continue globally. Offshoring not only has a large impact on the U.S., but as well as other countries. So a great example of this is India. So as more jobs were being offered in India, India's information technology companies began to thrive. India is now filled with highly trained entrepreneurs thanks to the offshore jobs provided to them and the skill sets that they acquired along the way. Offshoring of job creates work for both high and low-skilled workers within both the U.S. and other countries. A German software company employs thousands in the U.S., and among many of those individuals, they make more than the U.S. median salary. Salaries of engineers hired in India increased from 25% of U.S. salaries to 75% within 2 years. Offshoring manufactured computer hardware resulted in lower cost of hardware prices, which then forced a growth in the entire industry itself. Issues and side effects that arise from jobs offshoring. Of those are, for one, language barriers, time difference, and issues with highly skilled workers. So as far as language barriers go, foreign accents oftentimes are found hard, if not impossible, to understand via call centers. And with a time difference, many workers are forced to work hours they may not be used to. For example, the time difference between the U.S. and India forces Indian workers to work at times they would usually be asleep. You can see how this would cause major disruption within their lives. And actually force many to quit. As far as highly skilled workers go, the force for demand of salaries to rise makes offshoring no longer worthwhile for profit. Employees working offshore typically are faced to require additional skills atop of those already acquired. So there are various ethical principles that arise when hiring foreign workers, and of those principles, our book discusses Kantianism and utilitarianism. Kantianism is the principle that human beings are rational beings and should never be used as a means of productivity, enjoyment, and happiness for another person, where utilitarianism is referred to as the principle of humans dictating their actions to amount to happiness. In the case of hiring foreign workers, our book refers to both principles as treating people as ends in themselves. Kant suggests that hiring foreign workers at a low price to produce a marketable product would equate to not treating them as a means to an end, but not treating them as such at all. Whereas, from a utilitarianism perspective, one would weigh the ethics of hiring foreign workers based on the profits they would draw in, depending on the utilities one may carry. Some questions and assumptions to consider that cause disruption on the basis of ethics when hiring foreign workers are, for one, is it unfair to employ foreign workers at a lower cost, basically taking away job availability from the U.S.? So Kant sees this concern as an end in the foreign workers themselves, as they are aware of such trade-off to better one's own lives. Another question to consider is, are you taking advantage of foreign workers by hiring them at a lower cost and forcing them into undesirable working environments? Utilitarianism principle sees this concern as unethical because it does not consider whether or not the working conditions are up to the par in terms of the working conditions that the U.S. requires. Therefore, paying more when hiring foreign workers to ensure quality working conditions would be seen as ethical and not as an end in themselves. Our book assures that there is nothing unethical about choosing the cheaper of two products, services, and/or employees. Governments have passed many laws to ensure equal pay among the U.S. and other countries hiring offshore. These laws were passed to make sure that employers from less advantageous offshore jobs do not exploit themselves and draw attention towards the salary gap. A result of this law meant for higher paid groups to get most of the jobs offered. U.S. programmers take the lead for filling job positions being offered due to this. Equal pay protects the high salaries made in the U.S. and the revenues of the companies that pay these higher salaries. It is extremely important to consider that every single choice you make when hiring offshore is that every decision not only affects your employee being hired, but the entire company as a whole. The owners or the stockholders of your company, your customers, and ultimately this can have the potential of affecting people in other businesses besides your own as well. Our book concludes that although there are many controversies on whether or not hiring lower paid workers is ethical, our textbook suggests that there is no right or wrong argument for this case. However, to be cautious when hiring offshore and consider all concerns, questions, and assumptions discussed. To sum it all up, basically, as the offshoring of jobs increases, the percentage of mass layoffs will rise. However, if we're able to adapt to this transition through planning, flexibility, and ultimately focus on advancing our educational programs, the need for offshoring will continue without rendering any businesses in its way. When hiring offshore foreign workers, it is extremely important to consider all ethical perspectives in hopes of ensuring higher morale, increased productivity, and company loyalty. Offshoring has its problems, whether it be seen through language barriers, time difference, and employees simply finding that they need new skills. It's really important to understand that aside from these side effects and issues, offshoring is so important because with the mixture of increasing income and reduced price for manufactured goods and services, varying countries now have the opportunity to grow their economies, which then creates more jobs on both ends. Thank you.